Hello again. I am Jared Case, curator of film exhibitions at the Dryden Theater and the George Eastman Museum, with another streaming recommendation for you. And I brought along another special guest. Today, it is the George Eastman Museum Film Preservation Manager, Anthony Labate. And since we're doing Thanksgiving recommendations this week, he's got a special Thanksgiving tradition to share with us. Welcome, Anthony.
Hi, Jared. Thank you for having me on. So this Thanksgiving tradition, I think, is peculiar to maybe a few East Coast television stations back in the 60s and the 70s. And it probably started at WOR, at least that's where I knew it from in the New York area, because I grew up down there. And on Thanksgiving, for whatever reason, they would run King Kong. This film has nothing to do with Thanksgiving, but it became this Thanksgiving tradition where for at least until the mid-70s, it was just King Kong. And then in 76, they started to add Son of Kong and Mighty Joe Young in this sort of afternoon marathon of giant gorilla movies. And I think the 76 connection is because they were trying to cash in on the 1976 Dino De Laurentiis remake of King Kong that came out in December of that year.
So this was one of those annual traditions, much like most people around the country have the Wizard of Oz tradition or the Ten Commandments that would come on yearly around the same time, and everybody would gather around the TV and watch it.
Yeah, if they were interested. I know for that first time that I saw, which was on Thanksgiving in 1968, I was about a week away from my 5th birthday. And for whatever indulgent reason, my parents let me watch it at the table. They set up a tiny little portable television set that was next to my seat. And I had one of those single earplugs in my ear. And that's how I first saw King Kong, was sitting at the Thanksgiving table while everybody else was sort of eating their meal and talking. And I was watching King Kong. I have to say, there were no other children in my family my age. I was young, so it was a way to keep me quiet, I guess.
And so you've seen it in much better version since then, rather than on a 9-inch TV with a one earplug.
I don't even think it was that big of a television, probably like a 7-inch screen. And those expanding antennas that, so with a lot of ghosting and the image going like that, and the lines, the rolling lines. Yes, I have seen it in a lot better versions, because back in 1968, the film was still in its edited form, because they had made edit cuts for the production code, maybe starting in 1938, definitely by 1952. So a lot of scenes had been cut out and then were put back in the early 70s. So I have seen it on the screen in 16mm prints in like various libraries and college courses. And I've seen it in beautiful 35mm print several times over in the Dryden Theater.
So how many times do you think you've seen King Kong now?
It has to be more than 50 times, because there was a wrinkle in my King Kong viewing when we moved to New Jersey in 1972. We could get WOR for about a month or so, and then I believe one of the World Trade Center towers was topped off, and where we lived, it blocked the WOR signal from the Empire State Building to where our neighborhood was, so we could no longer get it. So there were a number of years I was watching parts of it through heavy snow and static. I was not a happy camper. But in 1980, my second pre-recorded VHS tape I bought or it was given to me, I think it was $59.95, was a video cassette of King Kong. So I started to get my fill again of it.
But this was a formative experience, not just in terms of holidays and the way you would spend Thanksgiving, but it was also formative in what ended up being your career. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's such an influential film for so many people, and it was such a blockbuster. It really it's probably one of the first like old movies I ever watched because I was just about 5 years old, and it really started my love for old movies there. They were on television a lot, so at least I had that experience where I was watching it with my parents. Being such moviegoers, they would point out films. But King Kong is one of those films that, damn it, if it's on television and I come across it, I can't turn it off. It's to me, it's such a good film, and although I no longer watch it on Thanksgiving, but I will always associate it with Thanksgiving.
Is there, I mean, can you talk about what grabbed you as a child, and or if there's something you appreciate even more today that keeps you coming back to the title?
Well, as a child, I think it's monsters and dinosaurs. I think is always appealing to children, and it's such a, like, on the surface, such a simple story, but such a classic story. It just it hits all the right buttons, and I think not only for children, it just hit all the right buttons. And then growing up and learning more about the film and learning more about the special effects and how they were done, it was such a blockbuster in its day of just breaking every boundary of how you do special effects, that you have to appreciate it for that alone is just amazing what they could do. I mean, you had The Lost World in 1925, which is really sort of the blueprint for what King Kong, how they made King Kong. So, and it's like, and Merian Cooper, who directed the film, and this was his brainchild, was this film, had originally planned to make this film shooting on location in Africa and using a real gorilla, which probably would have been very impractical. When he came to RKO, David Selznick brought him to RKO because Selznick and Cooper had worked together at Paramount, which released Cooper and Schoedsack's films Grass in 1925 and Chang in 27 and Four Feathers in 29, which did a lot of this location shooting. That Selznick brings him as sort of like as an associate producer to RKO, and which was in really dire financial straits at the time. And one of the projects at RKO that was in production was a film Willis O'Brien, who did all the miniature work and the animation work in The Lost World, was working on at RKO called Creation. And Selznick said, try to salvage this picture and don't worry about your gorilla film. But when Cooper saw what O'Brien was doing with the miniature dinosaurs, it's like he realized this was the way to do it. You don't need to shoot on location. And with the Dunning sort of matte process and rear projections, like knew that there was a very feasible and more economical way of doing this film. So that's when all the miniature work came in. They scrapped Creation. They were going to use some of the dinosaur footage from it that had been already shot, but I don't think any of it ended up in the final cut for King Kong. And just like, let's do this. And the film did spiral kind of out of budget. I know it was at least up to $650,000 by the time I think principal photography finished shooting, and that was an astronomical sum. When a normal A picture cost between like $250,000 to $300,000, and it took a very long time. It was in production for over a year because of all the special effects and how long it took for all the miniature work to be done. So you just have to admire it for every just technical level and how it just ratcheted up the special effects at that time.
Yeah, I don't think it can be overstated exactly how influential this film was. in Hollywood history, particularly with the special effects and how Willis O'Brien's work influenced Ray Harryhausen's work into full stop motion animation films and these practical effects that we saw throughout the 50s and gearing up towards the blockbuster era in the 1970s when we started getting into different effects with Close Encounters of the Third Kind or Star Wars, and move into Tron in the 80s, and suddenly, we think of the blockbuster era starting in the 1970s, but this was a big budget and very successful film back in the 1930s.
It really helped stabilize the financial conditions at RKO at the time, and it was released on March 2nd, 1933, which was 2 days before FDR was inaugurated, and it opened at the Radio City Music Hall and the RKO Roxy, these two enormous theaters at Rockefeller Center, which had a combined seating capacity of 10,000. And it was sold out for every show. And starting on Monday, March 6th, FDR had closed all the banks. It was this bank holiday, so people didn't have money, yet that movie just sold out. Every show, it was still sold out despite the bank holiday. People were flocking to see it. Now, at that time, Radio City Music Hall's policy was to run a film just 1 week, and then a new film came in, which was the case with King Kong, where it played the 1 week at the Radio City Music Hall, but it continued on for another 2 weeks at the RKO Roxy. And both of the stage shows there were sort of themed. They did a jungle theme stage show, both of the theaters. And then about a week later, it opened at Grauman's Chinese Theater in Hollywood, again, to acclaim. It just did phenomenal business everywhere it played.
And I guess we should mention that the George Eastman Museum has done a great restoration of Willis O'Brien's earlier work with The Lost World. There was a huge project that involved many different sources and piecing back together as much as we could of that original film.
Yeah, because for years, back in the late 20s, First National sold the rights to The Lost World. The story rights, I think, reverted back to the Arthur Conan Doyle estate, and First National Pictures, who made it, gave the rights to the Codescope libraries, which edited down to about 1 hour from its 108-minute original running time. And for years, you could only see this abridged version. And then in the 90s, a much more extant print surfaced in Czechoslovakia, and then putting together with other little pieces here and there. I think there were some trims at the Library of Congress, the George Eastman Museum, and Ed Stratman in particular, who was in charge of preservation then, was able to piece the film back together to about a 100-minute running time. So, which restored all the subplots to the film. So, that makes a difference.
And it's interesting how sometimes fate will allow you to come full circle with this young boy watching King Kong in New York, Staten Island?
Yeah, Staten Island.
Back in the 60s, to getting him to have a career at a place that has restored The Lost World and can play 35mm prints of King Kong. Last time we showed it was last year, 2019, when we had Fay Ray, her daughter, came to have a talk at the George Eastman Museum. But beyond that, one of our great supporters, Ted Curtis, was the son of General Edward Curtis, who worked at Kodak and was in the war with Merian Cooper, and they were fast friends. And when Cooper did shoot Grass and I'm forgetting the name of the other one on location. I'm sorry? Chang. Yeah. Shot them on location. Curtis was very involved in helping them devise ways to get that film processed and shot in the wild.
And then Curtis's son, Edward Curtis Jr., was the godson of Merian Cooper. So yeah, there's been a very strong personal connection to Cooper and King Kong, because I know Ted Curtis Jr. Loved King Kong very much as well. I remember him saying that on several occasions. So it is funny. That connection and full circle, kind of strange.
So, are you going to be watching King Kong this Thanksgiving?
Probably not. I usually watch it when it was at the time it was originally released. So
right.
So
that's a whole other discussion that we can.
Yeah, we're not going down that road. But yeah, but should it be on television and I come across it, I guarantee I will not be turning it off.
Well, thank you so much, Anthony, for bringing your Thanksgiving tradition to us. And for everyone out there that's interested in watching King Kong this Thanksgiving, it is available for rent on many of the standard digital rental platforms. You can also get it on DVD or Blu-ray. It is available. And we hope that you have a great Thanksgiving. And please come back for other recommendations. Thank you, Anthony, so much for being here. And we'll look forward to seeing your next projects as they come out.
Great. Thanks, Jared. You have a good Thanksgiving.